Hello.
Hello, Edie. Welcome very much. Welcome to the National Crochet Conference being held by Crochet Guild Australia. We've got quite a few people in the auditorium here that are very keen on learning what you have to say, and I'm thrilled about it because being Australian, you don't have as high a profile as you should over here. So we want to introduce you to the Guild and its membership. So first of all, Edie, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background and your history with crochet?
Sure. First of all, I want to say I have first cousins who live all over Australia. So at some point, I need to come for a visit. I was planning to come in July of 2020, but we all know what happened. So that got postponed. I have been knitting and crocheting for decades now, and I started out as a knitwear designer and then got a call in about, I think, 94 or 95 asking if I would write a crochet book. That ended up being the Crochet Answer book, which I'll hold up here, the Crochet Answer book. And that kind of started, like, now people think I'm just a crocheter, but I transitioned. There was not so much crochet around then. It's wonderful how it has taken off in the past 5 years or so. But there was a real need for quality crochet patterns and quality crochet instruction. And so I hope to fill that niche a little bit. Yeah.
In your experience, what's the most common area of trouble or challenge for crocheters?
Well, I think for beginning crocheters, those who are just starting out, it's keeping those edges straight and understanding turning chains. Like, that's hands down the hardest thing for people to understand. I think if you've been crocheting for a while, crocheters need to realize they're creating a fabric. We aren't making stitches, we are creating a fabric. And you want to create a fabric that is appropriate for the thing you are making. And I think a lot of times we miss that. People say, oh, I never do a gauge swatch. Well, a swatch is not about gauge. A swatch is a little bit about gauge, but it's really about fabric. And so we want to make sure we are creating appropriate fabrics for whatever it is, because a tote bag fabric is different from a shawl fabric.
So tell us about your range of classes. If any of you have gone to Edie Eckman's website, tell us what classes you offer and your books you've written.
Okay, well, I'll hold up the books because I have them right here. I happen to have the Crochet Answer
book. Oh, I've got that. That was given to me as a gift.
Okay. I have Around the Corner Crochet Borders, which is, excuse me, let me show you what I'm dealing with here. I have one hand. I had shoulder surgery. You see how my arm is all in this sling here? So I am 2 weeks post-surgical here, and I have to have it propped up, and I only have the one hand. So, okay, back to the books. So Around the Corner Crochet Borders has charts and written instructions for borders that go around a 90-degree corner, because how many times are you doing a blanket or something, or sweater, and you need to go around that corner and you have to fudge the corner to make it lie flat? So I got tired of having to do that and just wrote a book so that I would have the resource. I just wrote the book because I wanted the book. I did a follow-up, which was Every Which Way Crochet Borders, which has another however many, 139 crochet borders. So those were just written because, you know, I wanted somebody to write that book, so I wrote the book. I have Beyond the Square Crochet Motifs and Connect the Shapes crochet motifs. So, and some others. Those are the ones I have handy here. You asked about my classes. I have, so many classes. Lately, I've been teaching a lot of design related or design adjacent classes. So like crochet pattern writing workshop to help you write better patterns that are clear and concise and consistent and correct. There's so many poorly written patterns out there. I think a lot of people struggle following patterns just because the patterns they're trying to follow are poorly written. So the more I can do to help people understand how to write patterns and how to read patterns is useful. I teach understanding symbol crochet. Boy, do I love a good chart. I teach how to draw crochet charts using Adobe Illustrator. I also teach a lot of like crochet stitch workshops, so different types of crochet stitches. I love stitch dictionaries. So anything where I can show you how to do different kinds of stitches, I'm all about that. And let's see, I'm looking at my list. I've got a Tunisian crochet class coming up, design your own crochet borders. Almost all the classes I've taught for the past 3 years have been virtual. So I have a lot of students in Australia. I tend to teach classes at times that will work for you. So 7 p.m. my time is, I don't know, 8 a.m. your time maybe. So that works. I do have a lot of Australian, New Zealand students. I also tend to teach at 1 in the afternoon, which covers Europe. So it doesn't work for you, but those are the 2 time slots so I can get an international audience. And I have a lot of students in the UK as well.
And what are the classes that are the most popular?
Well, in 2020 and 2021, my most popular class was how to teach knitting and crochet online, because there were so many teachers who were transitioning to Zoom classes and they didn't know how to do it. So I sort of taught people how to teach online. I haven't done that as much lately, but I still have that on the calendar. I think math for crocheters has probably over time been my most popular one. And I have just recently made that into a course. So it used to be a 2 or 3 hour class and people would struggle to remember it and so on. Now I have made it an online course so you can take it in your own time, have more time to practice and so on. And I will share, you can look at my website and my event schedule, and I don't know if I can share that in the chat. Is that something that I can?
Oh, don't you know, I'm still navigating and learning Zoom. But
Okay.
so I think with the share screen you can do that, but I don't know who's the host of this at the moment.
If anybody, they can look at my website and my event schedule and see what classes I have coming up, or sign up for my newsletter, which will have all that information.
Why is maths so integral to crochet?
Well, everything we do is math. Like whether you know it or not, you're doing math. So you just have to, like, how many stitches do I need? Well, what's your gauge? If your gauge is 3 stitches to the inch and you want it to be 10 inches, then you need 30 stitches. I mean, that's basic 3rd grade math. Most of the math we do is only 4th grade math. So everything is only 4th grade math. You just have to know how to think about it.
So you've made your career out of crochet, which is fantastic. How can crocheters make a business themselves? What are the different options?
Well, there's so many different things you can do, and I do many things. I don't just make things or design. I tech edit, I teach, I knit, I just do many things.
But it is possible. It is possible for someone to make a living from crochet.
But you have to think of it as a business, and you have to make business decisions, not emotional decisions. So you have to think not like, oh, this is so much fun, I want to make hats. If you're going to make hats, you have to think, how am I going to make money in making hats? How am I going to sell? How many hours does it take me to make a hat? How much are my materials? Where am I going to market it? What's my marketing going to cost me? Do I have to pay taxes? I don't know about Australian taxes, but you know, I know you have GST, right? So like, you know, what can I sell it for? Can I make money? Could I be doing something else that would make me more money, like working at the hardware store? Although that might not be as fun as the crochet. So, and then what am I going to do if I have to have shoulder surgery and can't crochet for 3 months? Yes. Right? These are questions that are real life questions that really happen.
Yeah. In all your time of crocheting and teaching, what's the most common mistake crocheters make?
I would say not realizing they're making a fabric. Just not understand. I mean, I talked about that before, but it's not so much technique as it is not understanding the idea of fabric and overall project rather than individual stitches.
Yes, I went to the Crochet Guild of America conference in New Orleans last year, and that was probably the single most significant thing that I took out, was learning how to draft a pattern, like a schematic,
Right.
and doing my gauge and working out, okay, with the 10 centimetres, I can, have 20 trebles, 10, and then working out mathematically how much fabric I needed to make. And then we
Right.
actually, in our class, we actually got big sheets of butcher's paper and brought in a garment that we wanted to turn into a crochet garment, but it mightn't necessarily have been a crochet garment to start with. And then we had to work out, and it suddenly occurred to me, and this might sound basic to everybody else, that you can actually go and buy a sewing pattern, right? From
Sure.
Butterick, McCall's or whatever, Vogue, and crochet your fabric to fit the pieces, and then you can seam it together. Now, to anyone else, that might sound so basic, but to me, it was like a revelation and a light bulb moment that that's what you can do to create your own patterns and your own designs to fit you. But I wanted to get you to share, before we end off the interview, you've got a fantastic blog, and I loved reading your blog post, which was titled, "What are the lies we tell ourselves about crochet that we really shouldn't?" Could you talk to us about that for a few minutes?
Right. Well, let me bring it up so I can remember. Did you play bingo? Did you play the
Yes.
bingo game about the lies we tell ourselves? So I had so much fun writing that. And hang on just a second, because I have to remember what they all are. But
I know there were 23.
yeah,
I was shocked about that.
there were a lot of them, but they were all true, right? So 23 lies we tell ourselves. For instance, this gauge is close enough. You do a gauge swatch, you think, yeah, it's close enough. Well, if you're not matching the pattern gauge, you are setting yourself up for a world of hurt if it has to fit, or you don't have enough yarn, or the fabric's wrong, or all kinds of things. So, like match the gauge, really do match the gauge. Just go up, and you can't always just go up or down a size and think it'll fit. You have to know what's going to happen. Another lie is stitch faster to avoid running out of yarn. How many of us have done that? Doesn't work. I can tell you right now, it doesn't work. One of my favorites is I will remember. Like, you do one piece and then you've made a change and you think you'll do the other one to match it, but you didn't write it down. No, you've got to write it down. You will forget. You have to write it down all the time. Short yarn tails are fine. No, they're not. You need to leave more than a 2-inch yarn tail. Blocking is a waste of time. No, blocking is really important. I don't need to count. That's another one. One of my favorite ones is it'll be a short wait. How many times have you not taken your crochet with you to a doctor's visit thinking, oh, I won't have to be here very long, and 90 minutes later you're sitting there with nothing to do but look at your phone? So those are just some of the things that I put on there, that because we just like to delude ourselves that
Yes.
that we don't have to pay attention to these.
Yeah. So if you want to read the full 23, go to Edie's blog. And Edie, you've got a special offer and discount for the Australian conference attendees. Could you like to tell us what that is?
I do, and let me again make sure that I'm saying the right thing. I just finished another interview just moments before. I don't want to get confused about what I'm telling people.
Well, I've got it here. Do you want me to read it out?
Yes.
Edie's offering 10% off her Maths for Crocheters course with the code Aussie, and that's in capitals, AUSSIE 23. And the offer expires on July 30th, 2023. So, but don't worry, all Crochet Guild Australia members will be emailed the list of discounts with the dates and the discount codes. And if you're not a member of Crochet Guild Australia and you're in the audience now, better sign up because you don't want to miss out on all those bargains. Edie, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I almost feel like asking you to stay on because we're about to have a panel discussion on acrylic yarn versus natural fibres. But I think that you've got another class to go to.
I'm fine. I actually can stay if you want me to.
Oh, would love you to. Would you want to join in? Can Edie join in from here? Great. Okay. Well, everybody, I'd like you to welcome Edie. Thank you very much. And now we're going to invite to stage Gail Herring from Fibre Naturally, who's also here representing the Australian Fibre Collective. And if you're not a member of Australian Fibre Collective, you should be. They're also a not-for-profit. So this is Gail, and Gail's also got an alpaca farm business as well, and in the market hall, so you should go and check out her beautiful yarns. Gail, take a seat. Also, we've got Andrea Clements here, who has an online business called Yarn Me Calm, and a shop that she's just opened as well, and she's fantastic. And I would like to also extend a huge welcome to our premier sponsor of the Guild Conference, Linda Tompkins, who is one of the founders of Crochet Guild Australia and also has a retail shop and an online business called Crochet Australia, separate entity to the Guild, but she was a founder of the Guild and was our treasurer, and still plays a very active role and is probably one of the most brilliant teachers that I've ever had the pleasure of being with. And of course, we've got Edie Eckman, the international superstar of crochet globally. Now, today's panel discussion is going to be driven a lot by you, the audience. We want to hear your opinions and thoughts on acrylic fibres and why we use them, what are our preferences, and also the benefits of acrylic fibres and what are the tastes and trends of consumers. We're all aware of the global importance that's being placed on environmental aspects of yarn, and is it right that we should be using acrylic yarns that are made from petrochemicals? Is it right that we should be using only wool yarns? What about cotton? You know, what are the alternatives? I'd like to hear from you so that we can have on record a list of our preferred brands that actually work and what don't. For example, my little hexagon cardigan that I free-handed, that's made of cotton, blended with a Patterns Sierra ball, which is 80% acrylic and 20% wool. Okay, so it's a mix of both. So I thought for today I'd wear all three fibres and to kick off the conversation. So let's start off with Gail. Can you tell us about the Australian Fibre Collective and your position and thoughts on this topic?
Yes. I'm very new to this sort of stuff. The Australian Fibre Collective was just a group of like-minded people who were a little bit tired of seeing Australian wool advertised as Australian wool, but finding then that most of the processing has been done overseas. We think it's important that, well, the Australian Fibre Collective, if you see that logo on any product, you know it's really been tightly scrutinised and that it hasn't left Australian shores. So the benefits of that is that, you know, if you do buy that sort of the product, that there's environmental considerations, there's labour considerations, it's all been ethically produced, and yeah, basically it's Australian. Yeah.
And Gail, you're obviously a proponent of natural fibres.
Yes.
Have you ever worked with unnatural fibres, man-made fibres? Because I find it's interesting because you're sitting there with a polyester puffer jacket.
I know, it's embarrassing, actually.
So, I mean, we say these things, but how do we, and how have you seen consumer trends? Have you seen them surge towards natural fibres?
I think definitely there is more of an awareness of the environmental considerations that unnatural fibres create, particularly petrochemicals and microplastics, which is an offshoot of superwashed wool. There is certainly a bigger consideration for people, you know, and the environment nowadays. We do see that. Yeah.
Andrea, we spoke about this last week, and you are very knowledgeable about this, and you've got some very strong opinions. Can you share those with us?
I can, and anyone who knows me knows that I can be fairly verbose. And my personal preference generally for myself is that I love natural fibres. I tend towards cottons as a choice. However, that's okay for me. I can afford to do that. I can afford to make that decision. I have a really strong opinion around inclusivity and accessibility. So I have some amazing humans that come to my store and buy off me online, and they can't afford. I mean, I was sitting up there working with a beautiful non-mulesing wool before by Lanes du Nord called Poema Tweed, which I adore, and that's, you know, $41 a ball. I can afford that, but somebody else can't. So for me, it's really important to ensure inclusivity and accessibility. So that's for me, one of those things. So I try to take that into consideration in sourcing my products. In addition to that, I also have a very strong opinion around trying to limit my footprint from a business perspective as well as a personal one. So all of my products, when they're sent out Australia-wide and internationally, are all sent in environmental packaging. And I'm so anal about it because when I first started my business, I started sending in normal mailers and really quickly realised how much that was going to contribute to landfill and started freaking out. So I changed that, and that's to the cost of the business because the environmental packaging is actually more expensive. In addition to that, I send things out in calico bags, and I do that because I also want to minimise the footprint and want to ensure that it's a reusable bag. The other part of that is I stock a huge amount of yarn that is sustainably sourced and environmentally soundly made. So there's an amazing product that is, I get that's made in India, but the owner of the company is an Australian woman who's fabulous, and it's made from recycled jeans. Saves the jeans going to landfill, and it's a 1.2 kilo of jeans makes a kilo of yarn. So every 1.2 kilos of jeans is being saved from landfill and going into making fabulous yarn. So that, to me, this is the things that I can do, that I can stay true to what I believe in and still ensure that we're trying to limit the footprint. And I also do try and ensure that I stock a huge amount of Australian yarn that's ethically sourced as well. So trying to ensure that inclusivity across the board, really.
Linda Tompkins from Crochet Australia, you're very knowledgeable about yarns. Can you explain to us, it was a surprise to me what superwash wool really is. Can you explain your understanding of that and how it's treated, the yarn is treated to actually be superwash, just simply in layman's terms?
Wool is probably not my area of expertise. I do know with your wool you've got your the micron level, and it's about the quality of the wool that's come off the sheep and where it's come off the sheep, and the age of the sheep, and the cleanliness and so forth. So the micron is about how thin, I think it is, the yarn is when it comes off. The thinner it is, the finer and the smoother that's going to be.
But perhaps, Andrea, this is your bag, isn't it? The superwash, or
The Fibre Collective.
Fibre Collective.
I think the
Yes.
Fibre Collective will be our expert on that particular
Well, I'm
area.
going to come back to you, Linda, on
Yes.
cotton in a minute. Okay.
I think very, very simply is that, I mean, I'm not quite sure of the chemicals that are used, but the wool fibre is washed in some type of sodium hypochlorite, I think, and that removes the actual natural coating of the natural coating from the wool, and it needs to be removed so that the polymer, the petrochemical-based polymer, can adhere to that wool. It also takes away once the natural coating is removed, it's no longer water repellent. The wicking has been removed. The wicking ability has been removed, and then it's coated, and how it's coated with this polymer that sort of fills in all the little gaps between the scales, so it's a nice smooth fibre now and won't felt when it's washed.
So, and this was, because, I'm a maker, I'm not a crochet business person, and so that was a real shock to me, because I thought I was doing the right thing buying superwashed wool to be environmentally aware, not realising that it's
Treated.
It's treated. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to move to cotton. And then I had a discussion with Andrea Clements. Tell us the cotton backstory, or Linda.
Well, cotton is very similar to most other yarns. It goes through a treatment. Nothing can come off the plant, as it is with cotton, or off the animal, or very little can, without much treatment. And then you've got the whole chemical treatment of growing the cotton and the water wastage and all that type of stuff. So any yarn that we use, there's always going to be some aspect of a non-environmentally friendly to that. I think it's more of a case of the degree of how environmentally unfriendly it is. If you look to your acrylics, that's got to be the extreme of your non-environmentally friendly. And then you work backwards from that.
Yeah, and this is where the quandary comes in, and this is where I'm going to ask Edie to step in, because a lot of the yarns that are affordable and for crocheters particularly, and my perception, I could be wrong, Edie, is that the majority of American yarns are 10-ply or 12-ply or chunkier, and that these thick, plump tubes of yarn that come from the big brands like Red Heart and Yarnspirations, and even the Caron cakes, which we get over here too, and are very popular because they're brightly coloured, or they've got really colour saturation, and if they're thicker yarns, they're going to make up more quickly. What is the consumer awareness in the USA about acrylic yarns? Is it as evolved as it appears to be with the Guild in Australia?
I would say that you're talking about a couple of different markets when you're talking about that. When we talk about craft yarns, so the yarns sold at what we call the big box stores, I don't know if you have those, but the brands you talked about, the Red Heart, the Bernat, the Yarnspirations brands that are acrylic, that are mass market, mass produced, that is a particular audience. But then there's a huge number of people who are very environmentally aware and are very much into indie dyers and sustainability, and the indie dye market is really big in the US too. I don't know if that's something you have there, but hand-dyed, hand-painted yarns. So I think there is a schism, if you will, between the people who don't know / don't care and are buying the acrylic yarns, and then another entire segment of the population which is more aware. Now, I say that with absolutely no, I didn't know I was going to be here and put on the spot, so that's just my gut reaction to that.
I would actually agree with exactly what Edie has just said. It's the mass-produced articles and items, because there's a lot of crocheters and knitters and yarn crafters, people picking up, so it's the mass production that's out there that's driving a lot of this towards acrylic and the non-environmentally friendly, but you've got that big indie market boutique where it's not mass produced. So that makes it harder, I think, for some of the shops to get that in and stock it. Or it becomes extremely expensive, and there are a lot of people out there going, I really can't afford to pay that. Those who really love their craft, value it, understand it, will pay the money for it. But there's a lot of people learning. They don't want to pay money and $30, $40 a ball to get a 50-gram ball when they're learning. So it's a give and take on a lot of these things, but there's the extreme of both markets here in Australia as well.
I also have seen more recently that some of the larger producers and manufacturers, they're actually starting to be more environmentally conscious around some of the offerings. So Lion Brand's a really good one for that. I mean, their re-up, their respun, etc. is actually made from recycled fibres, or primarily recycled fibres. There's still some additions. So there is starting to see some change in some of the perspective and some of the options from a manufacturing perspective. So I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And adding on to that, like everything we see out there, there's the knockoffs, there's the cheap stuff that want to get out there really quick, and there's the good side of even your acrylics and your what is considered to be non-environmentally friendly and the man-made stuff, but there are the good sides of your man-made as well, which aren't quite so bad. And it's working out what's the good ones from the bad ones, like every product that we have.
And it's a bit of a, as you say, it's a trade-off. Like, I'm not going to name names, but, you know, there's a very well-known consumer brand of wool in Australia. And if you're talking about holistically the environmental impacts and things like that, I think, yeah, but as you say, Gail, it's processed and carded and spun in China. And yet, but using the branding Australian, is that being truthful and fair? The other thing too is I got into a torrid argument.
So Edie's got a question.
Oh, Edie, yeah, go fire away, Edie.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that even within the indie dyers, that's also can be problematic because we're talking about small batches and inefficiencies of dyeing. Yep. With small batch dyeing, we're using a lot of water, a lot of, you know, who knows what kind of dyes. So none of this is everything affects the environment. Yep. To some degree.
I got into a bit of an interesting debate in Facebook a year ago, and I've gone dark in that group ever since because I was put back in my box. But I was putting forward, I was being a bit, I was posing the question about if you're making something for someone that's really important and you want it to be treasured, wouldn't you buy the best yarn you possibly could if you're going to be making an heirloom? And I made a thoughtless comment about they're just going to throw out a polyester garment anyway and throw it into the bin, and it's going to be recycled because, you know, they're going to find out that it's acrylic eventually and blah, blah, blah. And then it's never going to break down. It's always going to be there in landfill. And the person came back to me privately and publicly and said, how dare you, how could you possibly say that? If you're making something, it's the thought that counts, and if it's valued by the recipient, it is going to last forever. It will be handed down, and acrylic is perfect for that because it will never dissolve. It will stay there for the rest of time, which is what the intention is of the makeup, to be handed down. So I had a bit of fun with that.
Sam, can I just
go
on to this one? I mean, I think there is a fallacy that Gail and I were talking about it yesterday. There are so many fallacies about what actually happens to various fibres out there, whether it be the acrylic that it never breaks down, whether it be the yarn that the hollow fibres, or that it's better than this or it's worse than this. There are a lot of personal choices out there as well in terms, there's allergies that people get, so that can often drive the fibres that people get. I mean, I've got a lady who comes into my shop. She buys acrylic, she works with cotton, and she decided she would try a wool blend. She came back 3 days later, hives all over her, and brought it all back. She said, I can't use it. So you've got to also be aware and cater for people who have that. A lot of the time, the baby stuff, they go to the nylon, they go to the acrylic, because babies can be more susceptible and allergic to the natural fibres. So you've got to take that into account as well. It's not made just for the cheap and get the mass production. There is a purpose for some of this as well, and if it's made properly, it can last, it can achieve the purpose it's supposed to achieve, and becomes a lovely item that lasts as long as it possibly can.
I would totally agree with that. I have a huge amount of customers that make for charity. They make for Kogo, they make for Geelong Mums, and so for them, and they make the most beautiful things to give away. And for them, they don't spend a lot on the yarn that they buy. They make prolifically because it's so needed, and they also know that it's probably not going to be washed by hand. They want to make sure that it's anti-peeling. They want to make sure it's going to work, it's going to last for whoever they're making it for. So there is, I think, whilst we all want to do the best by the environment, we all have the best intention, I think we also need to think about trying to minimise our impact where we can, but also thinking about what the best is for everybody to ensure that inclusivity too.
Absolutely. I have customers who walk in and said, I would love to make my daughter, using this luxury yarn, a blanket for her child. But I know she will not treat it with respect, so she's getting acrylic. Because that way, it doesn't matter. She can throw it into the machine. The kids can get sick all over it. She's not going to feel guilty about everyday wear and tear on this thing. Later, she's made her another one when the kids have grown up, and she's appreciated it. But at that age, she couldn't. So there's also, you've got to look at how things are going to be used and taken by the other person if you're making it for somebody else.
I'm going to ask for a microphone so that I can go down into the audience here, and if you've got a question you'd like to ask our wonderful speakers today, please go forward, because I would actually like to hear from you your suggestions of brands of acrylic or blends or wools, so that we can share information and what your experiences are. Or cottons. Or alpacas.
Or any other luxurious fibre out there.
Because I want to learn, I want to find new brands. I mean, like, for example, I've discovered a brand from K-Law called Plassard Primo, which I love. But it's inexpensive, and I think it's 70% acrylic, 30% wool. So, but I love it. That's just me, because it's got a slub on it and it's got a bit of fluff and bloom. But I'd like to hear from all of you as well. So I'm just going to go and grab the microphone from Mark, and then please put up your hand if you want to make any comments.
So while you're doing that, Sam, I think one of the things I'll just talk about is I had a look at luxury fibres. And there are so many luxury fibres out there. You've got your camel, you've got your yak, you've got your alpaca, you've got your llama. That's all your animal. And then on the plant side, you've got your linens, you've got your silks, you've got your wool pulp is the new one, and all these different blends. So there's so many fibres and mix of fibres out there. Those ones, like Edie was saying, they become the boutique inefficiencies because they're small. So that's why you have these things that are expensive, because in these luxury yarns, it's all small processing.
A question to do with fibres is, I took up crochet as a hobby, as a left-handed person, found it really hard to conquer initially. Still have my 6-sided granny square from high school, but it's now 4 sides, thankfully. I didn't realise until recently, when I saw a documentary on ABC, how cellulose fabric fibres is made. And I just saw recently a big fabric store brought out a new yarn this season that is a bamboo cellulose. I don't know if it's constructed the same way. Do you have insight into how big fibre manufacturers decide what to bring out without, I suppose, feedback from us? And how do we as consumers influence manufacturers to produce more sustainably suitable yarns for the mass market?
They do massive market research, or particularly the large manufacturers. The small ones, not so much, but the large manufacturers do huge market research, and they're often looking at things from a broader community and fashion perspective. So what they find is if there's a lot of noise, anything that grows legs in the media in particular, if there's a lot of noise about sustainability and people being environmentally conscious, they'll actually tend towards that. So the more noise that's made, if you're wanting to get them to steer towards a particular area, the more noise you can make, the better. Effectively, that's usually the best way to get change.
Yep. And if there's something you don't like, similar thing, the noise, but don't buy it. If they don't see the sales coming through, they're not going to continue with it.
Edie, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree with all of that. I think that, as she said, I don't know who said it, there is a huge amount of research that goes into with the bigger companies. And I think smaller companies just sort of follow along on the coattails of that. While I have the microphone, I'm going to have to sign off. It's late here where I am, and I didn't know I was going to be here this long. This was great. Thank you for letting me join in the conversation, and I hope I'll get to see everybody again sometime on Zoom. And I hope.
Thanks,
I'll see you
Edie.
all.
I'll end the Zoom call so that you don't stay there forever. And and in
Sam,
the meantime,
can I just add one thing before Edie does go?
oh yeah,
Just coming back to something you said right at the very beginning, you talked about how good I was at teaching, so thank you very much for that. But I do have to credit Edie with some of that. Edie, you may not remember, I did my crochet teaching course through the Craft Yarn Council of America, and
Yes.
you marked my binder, and I had my interview with Edie to get my certificate and my badge. So thank you, Edie.
I didn't remember that, but great. Nice to see. I didn't see you, so yeah,
well, there you
great.
go. You taught one of the people that actually founded the guild in Australia. There you go.
Awesome. Yeah. And tell Jenny King hi, by the way.
Oh, I will. She's been on radio all morning, so I'll pass on your best. Thanks,
Okay.
Edie, and
Bye.
thank you very much. Bye-bye. Now, we'll still keep on going. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment? Thanks. Jenny Whiting.
Thanks. I'm intrigued. I'm a big fan of natural fibres, and if I'm doing something nice, I will do that. And if I do use acrylic, it will be rescued from op shops. So I'm thinking stopped from going to landfill. It's already in existence. However, what I was actually wanting to know is, has there been any research to actually calculate the environmental impact of, say, wool production from the ground stage, whether it's, clearing land, if there's any fertilizer, water usage, like all of that side, versus synthesis of acrylic yarns, albeit from maybe petrochemical sources. But when you add it all up, kind of like the disposable nappies versus cloth nappies issue, has that actually been calculated?
I'm not aware of the direct comparison being done, but if you look at each individual market, they've done their own. So if you look at the wool and the sheep industry, yes, they've worked out all that calculation from clearing land and etc. all the way up. But I'm not aware of anyone's actually taken all those results and compared them.
I have a very vague recollection of there being a piece of research that actually, and don't ask, I can't cite it because I cannot remember who wrote it, but I do have a vague recollection of reading a piece of research that looked at wool production, acrylic yarn production and cotton production. And it did a comparison between them, basically looking at the implications from water usage and runoff and all of those sort of things. And I know that informed, I recently popped out to the Geelong dyeing and weaving mills and caught up with one of the previous owners, and And they were telling me that that informed their dyeing process and the way that they use water, because they were using so much water in the process that they've actually changed what they've done based on that. So there is, I just don't ask me where it's from.
Yeah, I remember that one you're talking about. I actually thought that was more about that environmental impact, but didn't really compare completely the cost side of it and that fully. It was just certain aspects that they were comparing. Yep.
Thanks.
When I was a child, the Australian Wool Corporation, how it just was, they were like gods. We grew up in primary school, believing that Australia's whole economic future depended on the sheep's back. And has that gone? And Gail, you probably can talk to this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my personal thoughts on that, when you look at the economy of Australia and the sheep and all the people that are involved in looking after sheep, which is vets and fertiliser companies and grass seed people, I think the sheep industry in Australia, plus the meat industry as well for the sheep, is a huge, huge industry. I don't really know how to compare that to acrylics though, but...
I don't think you can.
No, it's definitely a huge, huge industry.
One thing I'd like to say though is that the consciousness of consumers now about recycling, upcycling. We're having a presentation in here shortly with a lady that specialises in upcycling and how you can do that with crochet on garments. We've also, I don't know whether any of you know the sewing basket. Does anyone know the sewing basket here? If you don't, go and visit it. They're a chain of 3 shops, 4 shops in Sydney, and they take donations from Stash. And in Brisbane, it's the Nest. And the sewing lair at Beenleigh. And I've gone in there and bought or donated, literally picked up 30 or 40 balls of yarn for $10, mohair or something, some extraordinary yarns. There's a shop in Balmain, there's a shop in Newington, and I can't remember where the other 2 are. Caringbah and Kincumber. And for those of you that don't know, I think it's run by Achieve Australia, thank you. We did ask the CEO of Achieve Australia to come and talk to us, but unfortunately she was unable to. But if you've got Stash you want to donate, you can donate it there. They provide employment opportunities for disabled people and intellectually disabled people, and their proceeds go to support and provide employment for them. And it's very often you'll see a Down syndrome girl or boy in the shop unpacking or helping out, and it's just a wonderful, joyful place to be. I certainly go in there and collect crochet hooks for 50 cents, and you'll get some fantastic items very, very inexpensively. It's not just about yarn and knitting, it's also about everything to do with crafting. So in the words of Molly Meldrum, do yourself a favour. The best shop to go to, in my opinion, is Newington, because it's a little bit less expensive than the price points that are placed in the Balmain shop. Would anyone else like to ask our lovely panel some questions or suggest something?
Hello. It wasn't so much a question, I just had a couple of little comments. One is that silk, it's very exciting at the moment in the last couple of years to see the options that are coming through with regards to silk production and more ethically, because I remember being quite horrified when I found out how silk is really produced, commercial/traditional methods of silk production. So seeing things like the recycled sari silk, which I'm in love with, and the
Banana silk is another one that's divine.
what is it, sorry?
Banana silk.
Banana, yeah, I bought some banana today, it was lovely. And the other one is the tussar, which is a little sort of harsher, but it's more hard wearing than the others. So that's very exciting sort of coming through.
If you get a chance, try the eucalyptus fibre. It's often known as vegan silk. It is
Beautiful.
divine. Absolutely. It actually feels like silk, but completely vegan. So made from eucalyptus. Stunning. One of the ones that I can think of, Myrtle by Queensland Collection. Yes, yeah, stunning.
That's amazing. I'm going to look that in. The other thing that I was going to say on the other sort of side of the conversation is that the other, I think someone mentioned before, it might have been Linda or someone was mentioning the idea of use of things like acrylic when making things that are going to be used by children and things that are going to need to be thrown in the washing machine and things like that. Is that the other consideration is my dad has Alzheimer's, my dear old dad, and he's about to go into care very soon. And one of the whips that I've got at the moment is a fidget blanket for him. And I normally, although I prefer to work with natural fibre, that one's going to be entirely acrylic because there's no way that the nurses are going to be able to wash and easily dry something that is, that is not something like acrylic. So that's the other sort of area would be, aged care and hospitals and things like that.
I mean, I think overall, when you're looking at your fibres, it's about what do you want to use or make and what are you going to use that for? Like if I was going to make household items and cushion covers and things like that, I'm not going to go to wool. It's actually not practical. So you've also got to look at what's practical for the end use of what you're making. Scarves, garments, again, that heat. Where are you? I'm in Queensland. I'm not going to make wool garments. I would never wear them.
I'm in Melbourne and bring it on.
And yeah, so a lot of it depends on where you are. I'm going to use cotton for my garments because that suits that environment, or cotton-based or some other plant-based, which are good for that environment. If I did live in Melbourne, I would be slathered in wool, I can tell you, because I hate cold weather. So I would have wool in nearly everything I made as a garment, but still, if I'm looking for things at a household level, I would go to cotton because it's got that better durability for what I would use that for.
So obviously we have a really good understanding in terms of the fibres that we use, so wool, cotton, all of that. Do we have the same level of understanding as some of the different dyes that we use in terms of what we're putting into those fibres? I'm reminded of like the arsenic greens of like the 1800s.
It's a very good question. We don't hear much from them about what they're doing with the dyes. I do know that they give us a little bit of information as a retailer, but we ask the questions as well. They do try and look at the safety side of things. They do experiment with more of the natural things because they're aware, as Andrea said earlier, they're aware of the environmentally conscious people that we have out there as consumers. They are also looking at what's sustainable for the environment. So they're not intentionally going to find stuff that's bad. They are looking at different ways of getting more natural dyeing and processing.
There's also certifications that you can actually see on different yarn brands, so you can ascertain whether or not there is, whether or not it's ethically made and the degree of impact that it has. So I would actually do that if you have those concerns. If you really wanted to, not everybody will take the time, to be honest. I know I've got some amazing, fabulous indie dyers around me and around the Bellarine region that only use natural dyes. They won't use anything other than a natural, and I love that. But not everybody will do that. So I think if it's something that you're passionate about, something you believe in, I think it sits with you to try and find that information. I know that I try and have that information readily available for anything that I stock, but there are times that we can't even get it.
Exactly. Yeah, they just give us general principles of what they've used, and we have to go on that. But yeah, it's a case of if you want to know, you can push to get some of the information.
As experts, I'd love it if we could end this discussion but particularly you with Linda, with Crochet Australia, and of course with Yarn Me Calm with Andrea. Can you give us your top 3 personal favourites of...
Personal or professional?
Personal. Favourites in a blend, a cotton, if appropriate, or a wool?
Do you mean plant versus animal?
Yes. It's not versus, it's in addition to.
So, yeah, not versus, you're right. It's a plant-based, an animal-based, and then blends.
Yes.
Yep. Well, cotton is definitely one of my favourites from a plant-based.
Yes, but what brand? So that our consumers here today, we can go out and it's what you personally like to use.
Okay. Personally, I like to use several different cotton brands.
That's right. So I'm
Yep.
saying, what are the several that you like?
So my the Sheepies Katona cotton we talked briefly about yesterday, of those who were in here. The Fiddlesticks Wren as a cotton, and then the Lisbeth threads as a cotton to go to something more delicate and finer. They're my 3 go-to cottons.
Now, do you want to make a comment about acrylics? Do you have any 3 that and they can be acrylic blends?
Yep. If I look at your man-made side, so if I put them
Alright,
in the 3
man-made,
categories,
yeah.
you've got your plant-based, you've got your man-made, and you've got your animal. The man-made would be the Fiddlesticks acrylic Superb 8 yarn.
Oh, it's a beautiful yarn.
I don't know if people are aware, and it's not out there anymore, unfortunately, but I think it was about 2013, 14, someone might have the date, you're more good with dates, where there was a Lismore group did a study of over 50 acrylic yarns in the market at that point in time. It was a great read, and what they tested all these different acrylics on for their yardage, their value for money, the washability, the shrinkage, the smoothness, the pilling, shininess, easy to work with, how it worked with different hooks. And the Fiddlesticks acrylic yarn at that time came up as number 2.
Wow.
Out of 50 yarns that were out there. There's been another study done 2 years ago. That was an Australian one. There was another one done 2 years ago, but it was done in the UK and looked with all of the European acrylics, and it didn't cover any of the Australian acrylics. So Fiddlesticks didn't feature in that, but I think looking at some of the ones that they put in there, that would feature highly because it's very comparable, if not better, than some of the ones that did feature quite well in that study. So it is my favourite go-to acrylic. They do an 8-ply and a 4-ply, which is great. As a blend, I love the cotton acrylic blend, and that would be the Sheepies. Again, with their whirls and their whirlettes, only because it has that durability of cotton, but the acrylic mixed with it gives it a lightness that cotton can actually get heavy. So the acrylic blended with it gives it a lightness and just that little bit more warmth than cotton would, which is good for a Queensland winter, not necessarily down here. On the wool side, I don't use a lot of wool, so I won't actually comment on that one.
Andrea, that was really, really useful information. Andrea.
Okay, so for a natural fibre, I'd have to say that my favourite to work with for blankets is Stenley Candy.
Oh, yes.
Which I mean, you've seen some of my blankets, Sam. I love Candy. I love the way it works up. It's a brushed cotton. It's 100% cotton, and it softens as you work it as well. So it's beautiful.
And Stenley that's German, isn't it?
Bulgarian.
Bulgarian.
Bulgarian, yeah. So I've got, don't even get me started. But anyway, my next would have to be the Fiddlesticks, Wren Posy and Finch. I've actually designed a whole lot of things utilising those yarns, and they are sensational to work with. I use them for amigurumi, I use them for homewares, you name it. I find them really versatile. And another cotton that I like, I've actually meeting with the most amazing, gorgeous woman who's got some Australian cotton, and she hand dyes it. So I'm going to say that's going to be my next favourite because I've seen
does she have a brand name?
Yeah, she's coming and meeting with me on Tuesday, and I've seen it, and I was.
So we'll have to wait until.
I got a little bit excited. So
are you going to tell us her name so that we can go and
you'll
purchase
have to wait
it?
and see.
Okay, everybody, go to Yarn Me
No.
Calm next Tuesday.
You'll have to wait and see. So, because I don't want to share anything, because we're actually doing a bit of a collab. So
No, that's cool.
But
Yeah.
I'm excited, and I'm a creator and a designer myself. So can I just say, if I'm excited, then yeah, I figure someone else will be.
So can we just, at a moment, look at what Andrea is wearing around her neck. And if you were here yesterday, she did one. She just whipped that up last night, freehand. I mean, you know, seriously, I said she has to do a workshop on that.
What Sam hasn't told you is I bought the yarn from the Call of the Yarn yesterday. So I own a yarn store, but I bought yarn from somebody else because it's what you do. Went back to my hotel and used my feet with my little short fat legs to hold my skein so I could wind my ball. So I've done a little video of me winding the ball. So my
when it calls for drastic situation.
Absolutely. There is no way that I would be stopped. It's as simple as that. You know, where there's a will, there's a way. My man-made, I would have to say, I totally agree. Fiddlesticks is my fave. More recently, probably their 10, Fiddlesticks Superb 10, which is just divine to work with. I have stocked previously Shkepia's Colour Crafter. And I've used Stylecraft, I've used Deramores, I've used all of them, and for me, Fiddlesticks is superior. It holds stitch definition, which some of the others don't. They get that, you know, when you make, and with some fibres, and you get stitch blur.
Yeah.
It's all that furriness that comes through and hides it all.
Yeah, Fiddlesticks doesn't do that. You don't get stitch blur. It keeps the stitch definition, so I love that. Man-made, that's probably my man-made, but as a blend, would be Garn Manufacture, the McLarney yarns, which I adore. They're a 50% cotton, 50% acrylic.
And what are they? Are they cakes? Or?
They're cakes, yeah. Those and the Vultrum, which is I get from Switzerland, which is they're stunning cakes. And what I love about both of those is that combination of cotton acrylic gives you a little bit of flexibility. So you don't have that, you know, when you make with just pure cotton, it doesn't give as you're making. So, you know, particularly when you're making some things, it's a bit, you know, it's sort of a little bit of a fight.
It's great for household because it doesn't give.
Yeah, that little bit of acrylic gives, and I find that's really, really good. So that would be mine. As for your naturals, look, I'm a massive lover of Pepin. I love,
which is also a Fiddlesticks 10-ply wool. It's so springy.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about
on your squishy
wool,
factor, it's very squishy.
Oh my God, it's so squishy. If you heard me yesterday talking about the Yarn Me Calm squishy scale, I love that feeling, and I'm one of these. I have very, very sensory. So not only does it have squish, but you know, with really well dyed wool, you get that vinegary, acidic smell.
Yes.
Oh, it has that. And so I'm really bad. I'll often grab the
So you're
book.
coming up with a smell factor next?
Bad. I might have to. But I just grab it. This is really bad. So if any of you buy from me online, I'm just going to warn you, I've probably smelt your yarn. Just saying. I'll grab it out, and because I love that smell, I find there's something really satisfying about it. So yeah, that's one of the ones I love, and I love Australian hand-dyed indie wool. So I love things that are very, very soft. So for me, it's anything that is really tactile, and of course I can't not say alpaca because I bloody love it. Who doesn't love alpaca?
Well, I was going to talk about alpaca a little bit, and then I was going to hand over to Gail because alpaca is such a beautiful yarn. I wish someone had told me, though, at the beginning when I started working with it, that it drops. And so I went back and bought another skein of something because I thought, oh my God, it's not. And then I went, when summer was over, and then I went to put it on, and it's now dropped down to about here. And on me, who's nearly 6 foot, that's, I feel like unravelling it and making it to something else. Tell us about what are your favourites. And by the way, if you haven't gone to Gail's shop in the market hall, her business is Fibre Naturally, and she runs an alpaca farm, and they're all natural. They're straight off the
alpacas back. So they're in natural colours, aren't they?
They are. We do a little bit of indie dyeing ourselves as well. So we're a little bit different to these other lovely ladies here because we, unfortunately I don't crochet and I don't knit, I do felt, but my main thing is I spin, and we have our own mini mill and we have our alpacas, and we produce our own like artisan yarns and blends from our alpacas, and a few other interesting blends that we think are interesting, I guess. We've got camel and alpaca, and the camel's our own as well. We also have got a recycled sari silk and alpaca yarn, and probably one of our better ones though is our merino luxury, which is merino with a little touch of alpaca in it, 30% actually. That is the trouble with alpaca. I think good alpaca nowadays is not dropping as much as it used to, but white alpaca is definitely the best for not dropping, and as you go down the colour schemes, because there's like, well, they used to say 22 natural colours, but probably more like 15, or infinite actually in a way, but 15 main ones. As you go down and you get to the scales on the black alpaca are smoother, and because they're smoother, they don't hold together so well, and then you start on the Suri range as well, because there's two types of alpacas. We do...
What's the difference between the Suri alpaca and the standard alpaca?
And the Wakaya alpaca. The Wakaya alpacas, the fleece grows out more like a sheep, and the Suri alpacas, it grows like an Angora goat, you know, with the dreadlocks, yeah, basically, and just hangs down. So there's not really a lot of elasticity in the Suri fleeces, but definitely with the alpaca fleeces, we're sort of breeding them more and more like merino now, actually. We can still, we've got pretty low microns. We can breed alpacas down to about 13 microns now, and not just one or two, you know, quite a lot. And alpacas have only been in Australia probably 35 years, 40 years now, maybe not 40. And when they initially came in, they were just alpacas, but with the Australian knowledge of fleece production, the quality of the fleece has just skyrocketed, and in America and in Europe as well. When they initially came in, they were just like alpacas, whereas now there are so many different grades of alpaca, and there's more and more good stuff, but there is still a lot of very average alpacas out there. And that's one of the problems that I have, is that just because people see that it's alpaca, they think it's good, but that is definitely not the case. It's like looking at a horse. You know, like all alpaca fibre can be used for different things, but it's a bit like a horse. You know, you don't buy a Shetland pony if you want to win the Melbourne Cup. So, yeah.
That's very useful to know, because I think the cheap alpaca that I bought from Hobby Yarns with a bit of silk thrown in might have been the reason why it dropped so much, you know. Buying yarn is like buying ingredients when you want to be on MasterChef. The better the quality of the ingredients, the better the outcome.
Mm. And a lot of people with alpacas really don't understand fibre. You know, they are an amazing animal, and a lot of people have them as pets, and they think, oh, geez, you know, I've got a beautiful fibre, what can I do with it? But the reason why they're probably sold off as a pet is because they weren't up to scratch for the breeder in the first place.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very interesting discussion. Does anyone else want to contribute and make any comments before we wrap up? Well, thank you very much for joining this very interesting conversation. I think you'd all agree we learned a lot. And I'd like to thank Linda, Andrea and Gail for giving us their time. Please go and come and join me in thanking the ladies.